She was trained to kill vampires. Now she is one. Critically wounded on a hunt, Raven Calder is turned by the very creature she swore to destroy. As she grapples with her monstrous new nature, a greater darkness rises, one that threatens both human and vampire worlds. To survive, she must choose: remain a pawn in an ancient war, or become something entirely new. Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The night was a smothering thing, thick with mist, soaked in the stink of rain and diesel, and cloaked in a darkness that seemed to breathe. Raven Calder crouched on the edge of a crumbling rooftop, the wind tugging at her long coat, her breath quiet and shallow. Below, the city pulsed like a dying beast, neon lights flickering, alleys steaming, windows glowing behind rain-streaked glass. She could feel him nearby. Lucien Vire, the ghost of her obsession, the vampire who had eluded her for years. And tonight she would end it. She touched the hilt of her silver-lined blade strapped to her thigh, then adjusted the compact crossbow slung across her back. Everything was in place, sacred glyphs carved into her boots, hollowed bullets filled with ash and mercury. A hunter's kit, tested in blood. And still, her fingers trembled. The ache in her side hadn't left since Prague. That last run-in with the ferals had nearly torn her apart. But she couldn't stop now, not when she was this close. She could feel him, like a cold wind brushing the edge of her thoughts. The older the vampire, the more their presence bled into the air, into the soul. She dropped silently onto a fire escape, metal groaning under her weight. In the alley below, shadows shifted. Then she saw him. Lucien stood beneath a rusted street lamp that cast more shadow than light. Tall. Still. Wrapped in a long coat darker than the sky. His pale skin shimmered like bone in moonlight, but it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Not red. Not black. Just sad. Ancient. You've gotten better, he said softly, without looking at her. Raven's blood iced. She hadn't made a sound. You knew I was following you, she said, voice sharp. I always do. He turned his head toward her, his expression unreadable. But you came anyway. She leapt down without answering, blade in hand, landing in a crouch. I'm not here to talk. Lucien's mouth twitched, something between a smile and regret. No, you never are. Then it exploded, movement, faster than sight. She struck first, silver blade slicing air, but he dodged with a dancer's grace, countering with a blur of fingers that knocked her back into a wall. Pain bloomed in her ribs, but she rolled and came up ready, blood trickling from her lip. You're still too angry, he said, circling her like a predator with no hunger. It clouds you. Shut up and fight me. She lunged, blade catching flesh this time, barely. He hissed, more startled than hurt. For one beautiful second, Raven thought she had him. That's when they came. The alley swallowed itself in motion. 3 figures, ferals by the smell of them, dropped from the shadows like vultures. Not Lucien's doing, she realized it too late. A trap, yes, but not his. She turned, striking one clean across the neck. But the other 2 were on her before she could reload. Fangs sank into her arm, claws tore across her back. She screamed, stumbling, the world tipping sideways. Her vision swam. Lucien moved then, not like a man, but like a storm. One feral dropped, throat torn out in a blur. The second he impaled with a blade of his own, ancient and etched with sigils. The third ran. Raven lay gasping on the wet concrete, her hand numb, her heartbeat slowing. Lucien stood over her, breathing hard, his coat soaked in blood that wasn't his. Why? She choked. He knelt beside her. Because I never wanted this for you. Then he bit her, not with hunger, but with something darker. A choice made in desperation. And as the pain surged through her veins and the world went silent, Raven realized the hunt was over. And something far worse had begun. Pain came first, white-hot and endless, like her veins had been filled with fire and wire. Raven thrashed in the dark, limbs heavy, mouth dry, the taste of iron thick on her tongue. Her memories floated like broken glass in black water. Lucien's eyes, the ferals, the bite. Then nothing. Silence. Not even a heartbeat. When she opened her eyes, the world was wrong. The night had turned crystalline, every edge sharp, every shadow breathing. She could hear the drip of water a block away, feel the slow decay of rusted metal in the wall beside her. Her lungs didn't need air, but she gasped anyway, trying to steady the chaos inside. She was in a church, an abandoned one, judging by the collapsed pews and the way ivy had clawed its way through the stained glass windows. The colors painted shards of saints across the floor, fractured and blood-streaked. She lay on an old altar, and Lucien was there, sitting a few feet away, arms resting on his knees, head bowed like a man in mourning. "What did you do to me?" she rasped. He looked up slowly. No triumph in his eyes. No satisfaction. Only guilt. "I saved you." She tried to sit, but the world spun. Her body didn't feel like hers. It was too light, too cold, too alive in a way that had nothing to do with living. "You turned me." Her voice cracked on the word, as if saying it aloud made it real. "You made me one of them." Lucien stood and approached, slow and careful, as though she might break or attack. "You were dying," he said. "They tore into you. You wouldn't have made it another minute. Then you should have let me die." Her hand went to her neck. No pulse. No warmth. Her stomach twisted at the hunger curling beneath her ribs like a serpent waking. He met her gaze evenly. "I couldn't." Raven slid off the altar, legs weak beneath her. "You don't get to make that choice for me." "I know." A silence fell between them, thick with unspoken things. "I've killed your kind my whole life," she said. "Now I am one. You think I'm just going to accept that?" "No," Lucien said quietly. "I don't expect anything from you. Accept this, control it. Don't let it own you." She laughed bitterly. "Easy for you to say. I've had centuries to get used to it." He paused. "You won't be like the ones you've hunted. You don't have to be." Raven turned away, fists clenched. Her body trembled, not from weakness but power. Her hearing, her smell, her sense of everything, it was overwhelming. And beneath it all, a rising thirst that scraped at her throat with invisible claws. "Why me?" she asked. "Why not just let me go like all the others you've watched die?" Lucien didn't answer right away. "Because the others didn't scream my name while they bled out." She froze. "You were calling for me. Even as you hated me. Even as you thought I was the monster." His voice was hollow. "I couldn't let that be your last breath." Raven turned to face him, her eyes gleaming with a faint red glint she hadn't noticed before. "I still think you're the monster." Lucien gave a small nod. "That's fair." She stepped past him, toward the broken church doors. Morning light was coming, pale and unwelcome. It would burn her now. She could feel it in her skin, a low warning hum. She stopped at the threshold. "You've made me something I hate," she said, her voice low and trembling. "And I swear to you, Lucien, if I lose myself to this, I will find a way to make you regret it." He didn't move. "If that day comes, I won't stop you." She looked out at the dying night, hunger gnawing at her soul, and took her first step into undeath. The world had become too loud. Raven sat on the floor of a dim hotel room. One Lucien had secured somewhere between the edge of the city and nowhere. The windows were blacked out with thick canvas, the air still and sterile. It had once been a place where people passed through, fleeting and forgettable. Now it was her cage. She hadn't spoken in hours. Lucien paced near the door, quiet as a whisper. He hadn't forced her to eat. Yet, but she could feel the tension coiling between them like a wire stretched too tight. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She could still feel the echo of the heartbeat that used to live in her chest, replaced by something colder. She wasn't dead. Not exactly. But she wasn't alive either. She was something in between. "You're starving," Lucien said finally, not looking at her. "No shit," she muttered, jaw clenched. He set something gently on the table, a sealed glass jar, filled with dark red liquid that glistened like ink under the yellow lamp. Raven recoiled. "No. It's donated. Stored. Bagged and clean. Doesn't matter." Lucien folded his arms, watching her carefully. "You can't survive on willpower. Not forever." "I don't want to survive." She pressed her back to the wall. "You made me into the very thing I've spent my life trying to erase. You think a little bag of blood is going to make this okay?" "No," he said, "but it'll keep you from tearing your own skin open when the thirst gets worse." She almost snapped something cruel, but her throat did burn. It felt like glass grinding through her insides, like thirst twisted into violence. It wasn't just need. It was compulsion. Lucien sat in the chair across from her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. "You don't remember the first time, do you?" he said at last. Raven looked up sharply. "What first time?" "The night your brother died. The air dropped 10 degrees. "I remember everything about that night," she said. "I was 13. We were attacked in the woods. You killed him." "No," his voice was low, measured. "I didn't. You're lying." "I was there," he said. "But I wasn't the one who tore his throat out." Raven surged to her feet, rage boiling up like fire. "You were there, and you let him die." Lucien didn't flinch. "Yes. And I've lived with that failure for over a decade. But I wasn't his killer. I tried to save him. Just like I tried to save you." She turned away, trembling. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she whispered. "Because you weren't ready to hear it. You had your story, you needed it. Something to aim at. Something to keep you going." Tears prickled behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I don't need your mercy," she said. "Or your version of the past. You're not the first hunter who's turned," he said. "But you might be the first who can choose who she wants to be afterward." Raven stared at her reflection in the dark glass of the TV screen. Her eyes weren't hers anymore. There was a faint gleam in them now, something ancient and hungry. She hated it, but part of her liked it too. She turned back to the table. The jar of blood sat there, silent and accusing. Her hand moved before she could stop it. She picked it up, unscrewed the lid. The scent hit her like a drug. Her mouth filled with venom, her throat tightening with need. Raven drank. Only a sip, but it lit her veins on fire. Her vision sharpened, the pain in her limbs receded, and something inside her moaned with satisfaction. She dropped the jar, blood splattering the table, her lips stained. Lucien watched her with something that might have been pity. Or pride. Raven wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "Don't think this changes anything," she said. "It doesn't," he replied softly. "But it means you might live long enough to decide what comes next." The city's underbelly stretched before her like a wound. Raven moved through the steam-choked tunnels beneath the old industrial district, following Lucien through a network of corridors that smelled of rust, mold, and blood, some old, some too recent. These weren't sewers. This was something older, something buried. The forgotten veins of the city where the unnatural thrived. Lucien's voice echoed softly as they walked, his footsteps barely a whisper. This place belonged to the Order once, before the Guild wiped them out. "The Order?" Raven asked, clutching the hilt of her blade, even though she hadn't drawn it in days. "Vampires who followed the code, who believed we could exist without killing, without ruling." He glanced over his shoulder. "We were a secret society inside a secret species. And let me guess, you were one of their knights?" "I was their executioner." Raven snorted. How noble. But inside, something tightened. Despite herself, she wanted to believe him. That there was a rule to all this. A structure. She needed it. Because without it, she was just a monster in denial. They entered a cavernous chamber that might have once been a vault. Candles flickered along stone ledges, casting trembling halos of light over faded murals. Images of vampires kneeling in prayer, surrounded by bloodless corpses. Saints and sinners blurred into one. Lucien stopped before a mural of a woman in red robes, a stake in her hand, her mouth stained with blood. She was the first, he said. A vampire who refused to kill. The code began with her. "What does this have to do with me?" Raven asked. He turned to face her, his expression grim. "Because you've been made without permission. That makes you rogue. The High Tribunal will come for you." "I didn't ask for this," she snapped. "You did it to me." "I saved your life," he said, voice sharp for the first time. "But I also condemned you to theirs. You're an unregistered turn. That makes you illegal. To them, you're an unstable weapon. And I'm a traitor." Raven stepped back, rage swelling in her chest. "So you're just now telling me I'm on some supernatural kill list? I needed you stable first. Not starving. Not suicidal." She turned away, fists clenched, trying to breathe, but there was no breath now. Only stillness and the thunderous silence where her heartbeat used to be. "I should have stayed dead," she muttered. Lucien was beside her then, his voice low and rough. "Maybe. But you didn't. And now the only way you survive is if you learn our code." I already had a code, she snapped. Hunt. Protect. Kill when necessary. And now you are what you used to kill. Raven's silence was heavy. She looked at the murals again, her throat dry despite the blood still burning in her. What does your code say about thirst? She asked finally. It says control it. Feed with consent. Never kill. Never turn without cause. Never love a mortal. Her gaze flicked to him. Why that last one? He looked away. Because we don't age. They do. A beat passed. Then she said almost bitterly, Guess that's not my problem anymore. No, Lucien said. It's your curse now. Raven walked toward the mural of the red-robed vampire. Something about her face looked familiar, strong, defiant, doomed. They'll come for me? She asked. Lucien nodded. Eventually. Then let them. She turned, eyes glowing faintly in the candlelight, her voice cold and sure. Let them see what kind of monster they made. The second time she fed, Raven didn't fight it. There was no frenzy, no guilt-laced trembling. Just need. The kind that settled deep into the marrow and whispered, You are this now. She drank from the blood bag slowly, deliberately. When she finished, her limbs stopped shaking. Her vision cleared. And that's when the dreams started. They weren't like before. Her brother's face, once a blur of memory and grief, became sharper. More vivid. She saw the woods again, the moonlight on his face, the scream in his throat. But now there was another figure, tall, distant, unmoving. A man in black. Lucien. She jolted awake, gasping even though she no longer needed breath. The safe house was silent, except for the sound of dripping pipes and the distant hum of traffic above. Lucien was gone. Again. Anger bubbled up, not just at him, but at herself. At the not knowing. At the doubt. So when she found the envelope tucked into her gear bag, no name, just a message and an address, she didn't hesitate. Find the man with the serpent ring. He knows what really happened. The warehouse sat near the docks, rusted and forgotten, like the world had already buried it. Inside, the man was waiting. Tall. Pale. Wearing a long coat and a silver ring shaped like a coiled serpent. You look like her, he said without turning. Your mother. Raven froze. You knew her? I knew all the Calders. Your line has always been stubborn. He smiled faintly. And cursed. Then you know what happened to my brother. I know more than Lucien told you. She stepped closer, hand twitching near her blade. Then talk. The man turned. His eyes gleamed, old, cunning, sharp. It wasn't Lucien who killed your brother. It was Varos. That name hit like a spike to the chest. Varos feeds on legacy, the man continued. He hunts family lines for pleasure. And your family? You were his next banquet. Lucien tried to stop him. Failed. But he saved you. Raven clenched her fists. Why tell me now? Because Varos never forgets, the man said. And now that you've turned, he knows. He stepped back into the shadows. When he comes, and he will, you'll need more than Lucien to survive. The letter arrived scorched, sealed in crimson wax bearing a mark Raven didn't recognize. An eye surrounded by fangs. You are summoned. 3 nights. Come, or be hunted. Lucien read it in silence, then burned it in the sink. They know, he said. And they're calling us in. To kill me? To judge you. The tribunal sat beneath the city, in a hollow chamber carved from black stone. There were 3 of them. One veiled in silver, one blindfolded with crimson thread, and one who barely seemed to exist at all, just a whisper in a robe. Lucien bowed. Raven did not. Lucien Vire, the veiled judge said, voice echoing unnaturally. You broke the accord. You turned immortal without permission. She was dying, Lucien said. The blind judge leaned forward. She was a hunter. She was human, Lucien answered. She deserved a chance. The robed shadow spoke next. Let us hear from the fledgling. Raven stepped forward. Her voice was steady. I didn't ask for this, she said. But I'm not ashamed of surviving. And I'm not your mistake to clean up. There was a silence, not the kind that waits, but the kind that weighs. Then the veiled judge nodded. We will not kill you, but you will earn your place. How? The blind judge raised a hand. Trial by blood. You'll enter the hollow, the shadow murmured. Hunt one of our own. Bring back its heart. Do this before the full moon or both of you die. Lucien stepped forward. She's not ready. Raven cut him off. I'll do it. She looked straight into the eye of the tribunal, unblinking. You wanted a test? I'll give you a reckoning. The hollow was colder than death. Raven stepped into the narrow passage with nothing but her blade, a vial of emergency blood, and Lucien's voice in her memory. Do not trust the silence. It's never empty down there. The air thickened as she descended, pressing against her skin like wet velvet. Every inch of this place reeked of old magic, layered with grief, rot, and something primordial. The tribunal had condemned a vampire to the hollow as punishment. Now they were sending her to finish the sentence. But Raven knew this wasn't just a trial. It was a message, a warning, a purge in disguise. She passed bones etched with forgotten symbols, altars to dead gods, shadows that flickered without light. This place had been built by something older than the tribunal, and it didn't want her here. Her target found her first. It lunged from the dark, a snarling, once elegant creature with white eyes and a gaping wound where its heart should have been. Still alive. Still dangerous. It spoke in fragments of a forgotten tongue, laughing through broken teeth. Raven didn't wait. She attacked, blade flashing through air, clashing against claws and bone. The vampire was fast, feral fast, but Raven was faster. Stronger than she'd ever been as a hunter. Driven by more than vengeance now. She was driven by clarity. This thing wasn't just a monster. It was a loose thread. A test to see if she could do what the tribunal feared. Survive as more than a tool. She cut it down in minutes, panting though she didn't need breath. Her coat was torn, one shoulder burned from an acid-like bite, but she stood over the corpse, eyes blazing. Then she saw it. On the creature's wrist, barely visible beneath dried blood, was a ring. A serpent coiled around itself, just like the one worn by the man in the warehouse. Her breath caught. Varos. This condemned vampire had served him. Maybe even died for him. And now the tribunal had sent his servant against her, masked as a trial. The hollow hadn't been a test of strength. It was a provocation. Raven emerged from the underground at dawn, bloodied and silent. Lucien stood at the edge of the tunnel, still as a statue. You're alive, he said, his voice low. She dropped the creature's blackened heart at his feet. Was that the point? His brow furrowed. What do you mean? She looked him in the eyes. The vampire wore Varos's mark. Lucien's silence said everything. This wasn't a trial, she continued. It was a message from the tribunal or from him. Either way, they want me to know I'm being watched. Manipulated. Lucien's jaw tightened. You're right. They're moving the pieces. Seeing if you crack. She stared out at the breaking sky. The sun was behind clouds, but she could feel it, burning just beyond the veil. Then they've misjudged me, she said softly. Lucien stepped beside her. What will you do? Raven's answer came without hesitation. Fight smarter. Hit first. She turned to him, something harder and sharper in her voice. We end this, Lucien. All of it. Varos, the tribunal, whatever game they're playing. I'm not their pawn. He met her gaze, and for the first time since she'd turned, there was something new in his eyes. Respect. They came at dusk. Raven knew they would. Knew the tribunal couldn't leave her unchecked after what she'd survived in the hollow. But what she didn't expect was who led them. Not robed enforcers. Varos. He stepped from the shadows like smoke solidifying into flesh, elegant, ageless, his eyes as black as obsidian, his voice smooth as oil poured over fire. Look at you, he said, circling her slowly in the ruined courtyard where it all began. The little hunter turned weapon. Lucien stood at Raven's side, blade drawn, jaw set. They had fortified the safe house for this moment, laid traps, sealed exits, drawn runes in blood and ash. It wouldn't be enough. Not against him. Varos glanced at Lucien. Still hiding behind the code, old friend? I broke it when I saved her, Lucien said. And I'd do it again. Varos smiled thinly. Of course you would. Because you're still ruled by guilt. His gaze shifted back to Raven. But you could be so much more. Raven didn't flinch. You killed my brother. I did, he admitted, almost admiring her resolve. He was forgettable. But you? You're a turning point. Is that what you call murder now? She asked. I call it pruning, he replied. Cut the weak to let the strong thrive. And you have thrived, haven't you? Raven raised her blade. Enough. Varos sighed like a disappointed parent. So dramatic. Then the fight began. It wasn't clean. It wasn't fair. Lucien battled two of Varos's followers, barely keeping up with their speed. Raven went straight for Varos himself, knowing she was outmatched, knowing he wanted her rage. But that's what made her dangerous. She didn't fight like a vampire. She fought like a hunter. Precision over power. Grit over grace. He underestimated that. Their blades clashed, and for a moment he faltered. She saw an opening, small, fast, exact, and she took it. Her blade drove through his heart, silver-lined, ash-tipped. Varos gasped. Not from pain, but realization. You, he choked, are not what I made you. No, Raven whispered, pressing in deeper. I'm what you feared I'd become. With a final push, she drove the blade through his spine. His body disintegrated, turning to smoke, then ash, then silence. The other vampires fled. Lucien dropped to one knee, bleeding from a dozen cuts, eyes wide with disbelief. It's done, he said. Raven didn't answer right away. She looked at the ash in the wind, felt it brush her skin like snow. No, she said quietly. It's just changed. In the weeks that followed, word spread, Varos was dead. A hunter-turned-vampire had done what centuries of war had not. Some vampires fled underground. Others bowed. And the tribunal? Silent. Watching. Waiting. But Raven no longer cared. She didn't return to the guild. She didn't swear loyalty to the old codes. Instead, she carved a new path, hunting monsters from both sides of the divide, protecting humans who couldn't see the shadows creeping in, offering mercy to those who hadn't crossed the line. A new kind of hunter. A vampire not bound by blood, but by choice. And at her side, always Lucien, the man she once vowed to kill, now her partner in a war neither of them had ever truly escaped. One night, as they stood on a rooftop overlooking the city, Raven asked him, "Do you still believe we're damned?" Lucien looked at her, something like hope flickering in his tired eyes. "Not anymore,"